sensorial. According to the Department of Health and Human Services, the amount of serious mental illness among inmates admitted to United States jails is about 7%, which means nearly 700 people with active symptoms of severe mental illnesses are admitted to jails annually. And with this shocking statistic, it emphasizes the connection between mental illness and criminal activity. And so, with this, we pose the question, should mentally ill criminals be incarcerated, or should they be exempt from their crimes? Now, some mental illnesses could cloud judgment or cause delusions, which we'll discuss later on. And few people argue that criminals with mental diseases should be institutionalized instead of being put in jail. However, nonetheless, those individuals still committed a crime and should be held accountable for their actions. And now, Addie Berger will go over the key definitions for our presentation.
So a mental illness, as defined by medical personnel, is any mental insanity illness which disrupts a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, or daily functioning. The court of law views a mental illness in a different way, saying that based off the McNaughton rule, the defendant has to be able to prove providing significant evidence that he did not know what was happening at the time of the crime, or he didn't know that what he was doing was wrong. And the delusion is an important mental illness which we will discuss later, where the brain malfunctions, sending the defendant a picture, making them think that it is real when it's actually not. And now Julianne will go in more depth about the medical perspective.
Okay, so one of the main arguments against putting mentally ill people in jail, which I at first didn't agree with, but now have come to believe that's correct, is all of the medical and medical research about mental illnesses that proves that the people afflicted had no control over their actions. Since the exact definition of a mental illness is a medical condition, scientific evidence is abundant. For example, when a person has major depression, a mental disease which can cause clouded judgment, the hippocampus part of their brain shrinks, producing less neurons. And the hippocampus part is the small orange part. According to an article from Harvard Health Publications titled, "What Causes Depression?" Another disease is schizophrenia, which is caused by a variety of different factors, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, or the NIMH. There's still not a lot known about schizophrenia, but from research done by the NIMH shows that when a person actually has schizophrenia, like depression and many other mental illnesses, there's a chemical imbalance in their brain that the afflicted has absolutely no control over. And there you can see a normal brain, a schizophrenic brain, and a depressed brain, and their different activities. Now, one of the main symptoms of many mental diseases are delusions. And when a person experiences a delusion, as stated in the definition, he or she actually believes that what their brain is telling them is the reality. And so they don't understand that it's not real, and they act upon this assumed reality. According to an article titled "Understanding Delusions" by Dr. Suprakash Chowdhury. Thus, due to their abnormal mental state, when a person is experiencing a delusion or inflicted with a mental illness, they are not fully aware of their actions, and they should not be incarcerated for their crimes.
As I said earlier, the defendant must be able to prove, providing significant evidence that they didn't, based off of not knowing, they didn't know what was happening, or they didn't know that what they were doing was wrong. And so in order to find evidence to prove this, they must undergo a 21-day-long examination by a certified psychologist or psychiatrist. The beginning of this examination is examining collateral information, such as medical history, criminal records, or your arrest warrant. And after that, they go through an interview of their family and friends to find out more about them and their patterns. After that, they must take an SIRS test, which is designed to cause the defendant to exaggerate the symptoms of his medical disorder. And the court of law has to go through all of these procedures to find out if this is valid, because a lot of times mental illnesses are not correlated directly to their crime. When I first began this research, I thought, obviously, if a person didn't know they were committing a crime, they shouldn't be affected by that. They shouldn't have to go to prison for that. But a lot of other variables come into play, such as in a study done by John Lansdowne, who's a psychiatrist. He found that 34% of insanity cases, alcohol was a significant factor in that. In 40% of the cases, the illness was present long before the crime was committed, so it wasn't really temporary insanity. In 2/3 of the the cases, the criminal had committed crimes previously that had nothing to do with mental illness, and it was actually taking a character instead of an illness. And LCD is going to give us some more specific examples of that.
So despite the brutality of the crimes committed by the mentally ill, 26% of defendants are found not guilty by reason of insanity. And one of the most prominent cases in the United States that reached this outcome was the case of Andrea Yates. Now, Andrea Yates suffered from severe postpartum psychosis after the birth of her 5th child, and as a result began to experience unnatural delusions, as explained by Julian previously. In 2001, Miss Yates drowned her 5 children in her bathtub, claiming by doing so that she was saving them from going to hell. Finally, after multiple trials, she was finally found guilty by reason of insanity. Now, regarding the medical aspect, Miss Yates' delusions placed her in an unstable mental state, which would then classify her for being mentally insane. However, legally, by the aforementioned McNaughton rule, she did not know that what she was doing was wrong. Now, at first, I thought that since Miss Yates' delusions at the time of the crime were so severe, I thought that she should have been rightfully found not guilty by reason of insanity. However, throughout the research process, I found that Miss Yates was fully aware that she was killing all 5 of her children in a premeditated manner. So I decided that her outcome was not only suitable for her, but for other mentally ill criminals as well.
So if we look at the big picture, perhaps mentally ill people in the government could benefit from not placing them in jail. The government spends more money on mentally ill inmates than sane inmates. For example, in Broward County, Florida, it costs $80 a day to house a regular inmate, but $130 a day with an inmate with a mental illness. Now, a sensible solution that could help the money problems and overpopulation could be assisted outpatient treatment, or AOT, which is simply a civil legal procedure where a judge can order an individual with a severe mental illness to follow a court-ordered planned treatment in the community. Now, AOT displays a successful solution for the overpopulation in prisons and jails, but any which way, the mentally ill criminal did commit a crime. And no matter how useful this solution sounds, being close to the community could cause a really safe hazard for the well-being of everyone. And when I was doing my research, at first I thought it would be good to institutionalize, these criminals who had possibly, they had delusions and had clouded judgment, just as Julianne said. But then I realized that it would be better for them to be incarcerated so we as a society and as a community, we can be safer.
The legal system of the United States aims to provide justice to those who have been wronged by any crime, including one committed by one inflicted with mental illness. However, in order to be fair, the courts have to consider not only the legal aspect, but also the medical side. And since, in order for a person to be cleared due to insanity, he or she has to be proven mentally ill, these two aspects go hand in hand. Although, when it comes to providing enough medical support to satisfy the requirements made by the legal system, a type of gray area has appeared due to the difficulty of this task. This gray area of uncertainty has led to cases such as the Andrea Yates case and the development of alternative options such as the assisted outpatient treatment.
Overall, the incarceration of individuals with mental illness who have committed crimes should become more common. Despite the medical diagnosis that people with mental diseases have chemical imbalances which alters brain function, jail is still the better option. The law of the United States has created strict guidelines as to what constitutes a mentally insane person and has outlined the legal procedures necessary to determine if they are eligible to plead the not guilty by reason of insanity plea. In the case of Andrea Yates, the plea was accepted by a jury which dropped all of the murder charges of her 5 children. Although she did have a horrendous case of postpartum psychosis, she did commit a crime. In the end, as a society, we all have to take into account that these mentally insane people still committed a crime. The only way to ensure the safety of the masses is to incarcerate those mentally ill people for carrying out the crime they committed. When innocent lives are taken, like those of the Yates children, it should never be in vain. Besides, how would you feel if you knew it could have been prevented?
Couldn't have done that if you tried. It was 10 minutes exactly. All right. Tell me something that you guys surprised you during the research.
Well, I was really surprised that there were other factors that kind of came into play because I thought, like, if it's an insanity case, then it's probably just their mental problems. Like, if they had the nerve to prove insanity, then they probably knew that they were pretty crazy.
You're talking about in a courtroom.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about the sources you used and how you could verify how valid they were.
Okay. So we used a bunch of sources from like national organizations, the National Institute of Mental Illness, and I know the Treatment Advocacy Center, and I know that you used some American, and so we used, they were all organizations for like .gov.org. Pretty credible.
Okay.
With doctors and scientists.
I want to know if in this process, if you started like with different perspectives, and then how those perspectives evolved, and at the end, did you still have differing perspectives, or have you come to one at this point?
So in the beginning, we were split on our perspectives. Half of us initially thought that the mentally ill should be incarcerated, and half of us believe that they shouldn't have. But then throughout the research process, we collected a whole bunch of good sites, and such as the case of Andrea Yates, that really showed us that it would be safer to everybody, the greater benefit of everybody, if they should be incarcerated.
So at the end, you ended up being the same?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How did your conclusion respond to any of the other research that's out there that would counteract what you just said, that you all think now that they should be incarcerated? How does that, like, how would you respond to someone who says, no, they shouldn't be incarcerated?
Well, I was the solution, so they would probably go over assisted outpatient treatment, instead of or being institutionalized, having a medication that they would have that inside the hospital that they would be in. But as a whole, they're still getting, they're being fed, they're having the treatment that they are, but are they really being held accountable for the crime that they committed? Because, for example, Andrea Yates, she killed her 5 children, and no matter what, those kids are gone, and so families are affected by that, and if she's being institutionalized, that would it wouldn't really bring justice to the case. So.
All right, thank you.